This week on Talking Real, we've brought in special guest Jessie Teehee to talk about real estate auctions, the kind of properties that can benefit and how that may be good for your clients or your properties that you need to sell.
Going once, going twice, gone.
Welcome back to Talking Real, brought to you by the Oklahoma Association of Realtors. This is episode 159 of Talking Real. And Nabil, we've got another good one on tap today. But first, how's your day going?
Day's going fantastic. Just everything's gearing up for Capital Conference.
Oh, yes, it is.
It's exciting.
I know.
I mean, there's like so much stuff to do, but it's exciting. I'm like, oh, this is going to be great.
Absolutely, it is. Absolutely. I'm excited about Capital Conference. We're going to have we mentioned this last week, an awesome Talking Real Live with Grant Cody from the Oklahoma Real Estate Commission. He's the executive director over there, and we're very excited to have him on. On that note, if you've got any questions that you want us to ask Grant, send those to us because we're going to have just a lot of questions about what's going on at OREC, some things that we can expect. And so if you've got any questions about anything related to the Real Estate Commission, send us an email to podcast@OKRealtors.com and we'll try to get those questions answered for you on the podcast.
Oh, that'd be fun.
Yeah. So look forward to that. You can get signed up for Capital Conference by going to OKRealtors.com/Capital Conference. Again, this is going to be fun. It's digital. It's going to be online, but get signed up. It's free. It costs you nothing. We're going to send you a box full of awesome swag. We've been sending out some cool stuff for our conferences, so it's worth it to sign up for free and join us for some of the sessions, including Talking Real Live.
Yeah, it's going to be a great time.
Yep. So this week we've got another special guest on, and this is one of the most informative. I feel like I learned so much in such a short period of time. I had so little background information on this or knowledge of it, and so it was really great to learn. We've got Jessie Teehee, and we're talking about real estate auctions this week. Yeah,
I'm excited to get into this subject because, you have a general understanding of what an auction is, but how does a real estate auction work?
Yeah, and, I learned a lot here. It's like I, for whatever reason, didn't even realize that real estate auctions are a thing, and it's a very valuable tool. And for realtors to understand that there are properties that this could be really valuable for, I think is great. And of course, Jessie's got a lot of great information. So let's just jump right in with Jessie Teehee on real estate auctions. We're joined here in the Talking Real studio with a special guest, and I'm very excited about this. I always say this every time we have a guest. I'm very excited about it. When I am, it's always fun to have a guest in the studio. And this week we've got Jessie Teehee. And now Jessie is a realtor, and he owns the Jessie Teehee Real Estate and Auction Company. And that's what we're going to be focusing on today is auctions. We're going to learn because, Nabil, I don't know about you, I know absolutely diddly squat about auctions.
I know it goes once and twice and then it's gone.
That's absolutely true. Nice. Well, we're at least off to a start of we know a little bit about what an auction looks like in a movie. But Jessie, how are you today?
I am doing wonderful, guys. Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
This is going to be fun. I mean, this is going to be a learning experience for all of us, not just Nabil and I, but all of our listeners, I'm sure. We've talked a little bit about auctions as we were getting ready for this, and so many people just don't understand. Like, they kind of know what it is, right? We roughly know what an auction is, but as far as how it actually works and what kind of transactions that may be a good idea to think about an auction and all that. So we're excited to have you on here to talk about this. And I guess first just give us a little bit of your background, though, and what's your role with auctions?
Okay. My background comes from farm and ranch. So I grew up, from a toddler to a teen, working on farms and ranches. So that instilled a strong work ethic in me. And then as I got into a little bit older, I joined the military. So I spent 13 years in the military. 10 years of that was with the U.S. Army Special Forces. I don't know if you've ever heard of the Green Berets.
Yeah.
Well, I spent 10 years under that.
I did not know that. I've known you for a while now, and I did not know that.
Yeah, I've got lots of stories.
That's a whole other podcast.
Right. So that I spent 13 years there, and then I got out of the military in 2000. I'm married for 25 plus years. I have 3 wonderful kids, 4 grandkids. Very active in the real estate community, auctioned for 18 plus years, trying to perfect that skill set, and And here we are.
Well, I'm super excited to learn about auctions today and kind of how that works. Again, I feel like I've seen signs in yards, for example. I think a lot of times I feel like I see them at maybe like an estate sale where they're selling all the property, but then they're also going to auction off the real estate itself. But I don't know. I'm really excited to learn about this. So again, we're taking the standpoint of we don't know anything about auctions. So from somebody who is interested to learn about auctions, where do we begin, Jesse?
Well, for me, I got started just about like everything else. I just kind of fell into it. Whenever I retired from the military, retirement is very it's overrated. So during my time, I was fooling around with horses, and boredom set in, and I stumbled upon an ad for auction school. So I thought, okay, well, we'll just give this a try. So I enrolled in auction school. I was in North Carolina at the time, and I went to Mason City, Iowa, to the Worldwide College of Auctioneering School. It was a 10-day long course, very intense, very exciting. You learn a lot, just not just about auction chance, but auction law, different types of auctions. It was very intense for 10 days. So I came back, and in North Carolina, they have licensure for auctioneers. Most states do. Oklahoma does not. So I found a guy that was willing to take me in, and so I started selling cows and swine and the like. And so I started a apprenticeship with him, and then that just kind of, when I moved to Oklahoma in 2000, it just kind of brought that with me and started. And I had an auction house up in Logan County. I did that for 6 months. That was my first failed business. And then I just found a niche with real estate. So a lot of trial and error, a lot of practice. So I feel like I've gotten very good at that. Yeah. So that's how I got started. Was basically I just fell into it, but go to school, learn. I have a lot of older guys here now that I can lean on or ask advice about. So, it's just part of the business.
Interesting.
Yeah, that is interesting. So what does a real estate auction look like? Like what happens? Because I'm trying to think. I'm like, what even triggers an auction?
Right.
Well, it's auctions they've been around for a long time. A very long time. So let me give you a little history on that first. So, auction comes from the Latin word auctum, which means I increase. Okay.
Interesting.
Yeah. So it was used as early as 500 BC. The auctions, different types of auctions, and then you fast forward that into the Roman Empire. They used to use that during their battles. They would take the spoils of war. They would auction off what was left. Okay. So we'll move that a little further along into the Civil War. Okay, so during the Civil War, similar activities would happen. The commanding general would have the colonel of each division sell off what was left. Okay, henceforth the name, if you hear auctioneers, referred to as colonel. Okay, so you have Colonel Nabil and Colonel Jeff.
Okay.
So every auctioneer has earned the it's an unofficial title of colonel. Okay.
Interesting. Okay.
So how that starts then is, so for me, I look at a property and I evaluate it, always see if it fits the auction mold. I don't think every house fits that. Like most of my properties that I sell at auction will be acquired properties, such as from an estate, trusts, probates. Those are really good because the seller typically wants to move those pretty fast. Okay, so that's kind of how you start. Is you assess it, see if it's the right type of property, and then there's a marketing strategy, a pricing strategy, and you just execute that.
So, okay, let's talk a little bit more about what fits the mold. So you're saying like you've inherited a property. So your seller, maybe it's not just the property itself, but also what's the characteristics of the seller. So in that respect, they want to schedule a day and they're going to sell that property that date and be done with it, wipe their hands clean. There's no negotiations. So when we think of a traditional sale, you've got the contract, you've got inspections, you've got this whole process.
Right.
Does any of that apply in an auction context then? Or is it that day you're buying it, no inspections, how do you deal with that kind of issue?
Yeah, and that's one of the real benefits to a seller is that you give it a day, it's going to sell on a certain day. It's non-contingent. You don't have to fool with inspections, negotiating inspections. The negotiations start on the day of the sale. You have a minimum opening bid and you go up. It doesn't limit the potential, the cap on the price of the property. And like I said, it's non-contingent. So it's not contingent on condition, not contingent on financing, appraisals, all that stuff. So it really benefits the seller most. Okay. So then the question is, if you're a buyer, well, what's the benefit to me as a buyer? Okay. The benefit to a buyer is one, because there's a seasoning period on that house, usually about 3 weeks. Okay. So that offers the buyer the opportunity to have it inspected, do some research on the property in the area, and get any type financing in place that they need. And even given today's real estate environment, it really gives them transparency. Okay. With multiple offers, it's, when you go to an auction, it's transparent. You see who you're bidding against. There's no, well, was there really a multiple offer or not? Okay. It is.
Interesting. So when you're marketing it, that's that 3 week period where they can do their own research and then come in ready to essentially make an offer or bid for the property. Mm-hmm. Is there some sort of vetting process for the buyer? Like, say I walk in and I don't have financing and I'm just like, man, I really like that. And that's way above my price range, but I bid on it. And, the bidding process, how does that work if I'm just like a Joe Schmo that walked up and I was just like, I'm going to try to buy that.
I was kind of wondering, like, how do you vet those buyers to make sure that when they're bidding, they have the money that they can actually buy?
Yeah, there's several different ways you can vet. You can have buyers bring a bank letter. There's really not a real vetting process any more than in a traditional sale. But for me, what I learned was it doesn't matter who comes through the door, who bids, as long as you have earnest money. That's the only requirement. You have to have X amount of earnest money. So it's usually pretty steep. So in a typical auction, it'll be somewhere between $5,000 and $10,000, and it's non-refundable. Okay. So there's the vetting process. If you're willing to write me a $10,000 check, and if you're willing to walk away from that, okay. But that money then goes to the seller.
And is that something they have to like stake when they walk in the door, or is that once they've won the bid, or is that sort of like up front? You're like, you got to be willing to write that check up front.
The buy-in.
Yeah, we get a buy-in. No.
And not that everybody's would be non-refundable, or is that just once they've won the bid, then they've got to come write maybe that $5,000-$10,000 check or whatever the case.
No, and that's a great question. That's one of the questions I get asked a lot. How much does it cost to bid? Do I have to give you money right away? And the answer is no. If you're the winning bidder, that's the only time you have to bring money.
Okay.
So once you write that check, it's understood it's non-refundable. So if you wake up tomorrow and say, "What did I do?" Well, I'll tell you what you did. You just lost $10,000.
And I imagine the scenario of somebody in there bidding that can't actually buy it, but I'm sure that's just incredibly unlikely that would ever happen for somebody, that they're going to be qualified getting themselves into that.
Right.
Where do the buyers come from? I mean, how do you market this differently? It's so different. I mean, your average buyer is probably not going to be familiar with the process. I mean, so is it more geared towards a different class of buyers, more like investor type buyers, or who are you marketing to? How's that work? And how do you get those buyers or bidders, I guess, in the door?
All of the above. We have come to the door. We have people who want to buy it and live in it, fix it up. They want to buy it and resell it. They want to buy it and rent it. So we get a whole gamut. And what gets them through the door, this is the key part of marketing, is price. Okay. So let's just say, for example, you have a house that you think after ARV, it should bring about $140,000, $150,000. So we hope to get about $100,000 at auction. Okay. So we'll put our minimum opening bid at $50,000. So whenever that syndicates to all the sites, you would be amazed at how many people will flock to that because they're looking at $150,000 house for $50,000.
I might be able to get a really good deal on this.
Yeah, it might get me a really good deal. Okay, so that's the key thing. That's what gets people to the house. I did a house years ago for a guy in a neighborhood, older house that it still had green carpet, it had green appliances, laminate countertops, and this is when I realized that there are a lot of people that want to buy real estate. During my open houses, I had no less than 200 people come through.
Oh, wow.
And it was just amazing to see how many people would just flock to this thing, just in hopes of buying this house. So that's the key is the price gets them through the door, and then you constantly are explaining and educating on how the process works. It's $50,000, then it goes up from there.
Everybody loves a good deal.
Yeah, everybody wants a good deal, yes.
So would you say then that they tend to sell for a little bit less than if you were to go through a whole, we're going to list it and try to get maximum dollar? I mean, do the properties tend to, because again, you're maybe dealing more with sellers who they inherited the property, they want a quick sale. So is there a little bit of just kind of in your experience, what would be less than a full price if you went through, or do they typically get bid up to what you would consider a normal kind of market value?
Yeah, surprisingly, the last probably 7 or 8 years, as our inventory has swung to this shortage, I've seen these prices get somewhere between 80 and 90% ARV. Okay. I mean, so if the house is $150,000, it wouldn't surprise me to get $130,000, $140,000 for a house that needs a lot of work.
Okay.
So it's really incredible. Now, back years ago when it was a buyer's market, it was a little bit different. It was getting 75, 80%. 70, 75% is probably more accurate. But yeah, they're going almost retail today.
Interesting.
Yeah, that is interesting.
Well, I attribute a lot of that to HGTV.
Right. The DIY is a lot more accessible and just more information. Probably a lot more accessible to figure out what a property may be worth with all the data on the internet, and probably easier to market it to get people out.
Right.
So, I mean, do your auctions, how many people are there bidding? I mean, I'm sure it ranges quite a bit, and do you do it at the house? I'm trying to figure out, do people just pack into the living room and you got 100 people packed into the house and trying to auction it off? What does it actually look like on the day of the auction? Yeah.
So I've tried all sorts of auctions. I've tried what's called a ballroom auction. That's where at one time I had 7 properties and I put them all up on a big screen. We brought people to the place where we want to sell it, put them all up on the big screen. You just rotate through each house. Okay. I didn't feel like that worked very well because I think that as humans, we like to see it, touch it, feel it. And so I have found more success taking them to the house. So the auction is always on site. And depending on how many people come, what the weather's like, we try and keep them kind of close knit. I've tried it in the front yard, and once the price gets out of the range of certain buyers, they're out. They just book. So
I think it's distracting.
Right. So I felt like if I bring them into the biggest room into the house, then they can find their way in there.
Okay, that's interesting.
Yeah. So there's a lot of strategy to doing an auction. Now, anybody can do it, but there's the little tweaks, the little details that if you don't know, you don't know.
Yeah, that comes from experience.
Right.
For doing it for about 18 years. You said. Yeah. Can't buy that, right? So, I mean, I have to ask, since we're going through COVID, has that process changed this past year? Did you have to tweak anything to accommodate for, all the things that are happening?
Surprisingly, I did not. The one thing I did tweak is I put placards up around the house, COVID warnings. The risk it's a self-risk. We encourage mask wearing. We encourage social distancing. People will do whatever they're going to do. Whatever they're most comfortable with is what we really ask. But other than that, the process hasn't changed. And as a matter of fact, and if you want to hear, I'll give you a story I had in June. We sold a house in Yukon. This was a client of mine, and he was liquidating some properties. And this little house, it had been a rent house for him for about 10 years. Good area in Yukon. And I thought the house would sell for about 110. You know, he would have been happy at about 100, 105. So we had 2 open houses. A lot of people come through. Come sale day, we have 87 people in the backyard.
You're just, ooh, yeah. Ready
There were 80. I counted 87. We had over 65 registered bidders, and this house sold for $131,000.
Wow,
That's awesome.
yeah.
It was really cool.
And that's sort of the especially in a market like this, it almost heightens that multiple offer kind of situation. Like you see, when you see everybody, you see real time, you don't have to guess what somebody else's best offer is. And so the sky's the limit, right? There may be somebody who's willing to pay whatever it takes to get that house, and they're ready to do it that day. So that's
You're like, man, am I going to lose out on this for $500? I don't think so.
Yeah. Well, you know, that's the great thing about the auction is because you get caught up because auction promotes action. Okay. So when you get a group of people there, the egos come in, the I want to win or innate desire to win sets in. And 9 times out of 10, people pay more for something than they really wanted to.
Yeah. Like Nabil said, it's just a little bit more. It's just one more bid. It's not. It's not 10. It's just $1,000 more.
Yeah.
Just a little. Just another.
Yes.
Just another.
That's one of my things I use. It's only $1,000. It's only money. And that's only money.
It's only money.
It's only money.
You can have this wonderful piece of property.
So you said something interesting a second ago. You said registered buyers. So I'm assuming those are people that might have told you up front that they were coming, and then the other people just showed up out of the blue. Is that what a registered buyer is?
Well, a registered buyer is someone who comes there, and we have everybody fill in just minimal information, okay? Because if they're the winning bid, we want to have that information there already. Some people will come as a spectator and not sign in, and that's okay. You know, I encourage people to come and just watch the show, you know, because if I can get more people talking about it and say, hey, yeah, that was pretty fun, it was pretty cool, you know, that's what I want to do is I want to spread the word that, you know, it's not new. But it is a very good technique to sell. So we get, you know, those people that come in, it may be something that I follow up with them later on, but that information stays with me.
Okay, that's interesting.
Yeah.
That'd be interesting to go spectate one of these.
Yeah, we're gonna have to go watch an auction.
Yeah.
Well, I'm working on a few right now, so I'll let you know when they are.
Please do.
Yeah, that'd be awesome.
So how does your business shake out? I mean, what percentage of your business is auction versus more traditional sales? Because you do both.
Yeah, you know, it's pretty small. I do about 35 to 40 transactions a year, and on a busy year, I'll do about 5 or 6. Not a whole lot, but I haven't really pushed it. I still like the traditional side of real estate, but I really, really like the auction aspect of it too. It's a lot of fun.
That's cool. That sounds like it'd be pretty fun.
Yeah.
And just it's kind of an interesting. I think to me, it seems like the hardest part is just getting the people out there. But even then, it sounds like you've got plenty of ability, especially in a hot market like this, where you know there's no inventory, and so property comes up. You got this one day to come buy it.
Right.
Come do it.
Yeah.
So I think that's kind of interesting.
Which is kind of what a traditional sale looks like these days too, right?
It does, you know, and actually they're kind of running neck and neck now. But, you know, the auction part of it, when you have an auction, what the advantage there really is if you can season it, you know, even for a traditional sale, if you can season it for 3 or 4 or 5 days and let more people see it, then that's more of an auction-like sale. But the actual auction is going to be different because we're bringing them all in one place, one time. We're going to have some fun with it. Everybody likes to hear an auctioneer, you know.
Yeah.
So we have a little fun with that. And yeah, it's pretty cool.
Have you ever had any like fights at an auction or people that get like mad, like bidders getting mad at each other?
You thinking of like storage wars?
Yeah, I am. I'm like, or just any kind of crazy story you've had at an auction. I'm just.
Well, you know, I've never had anybody get angry. I try and really control the tone and the volume so that everybody understands. You know, I don't want somebody to bid $1,000 if they thought I said $100. So that's kind of key is whenever you're doing your chant is to read people and make sure they understand. So I'm always looking at the eyes and making sure that they understand what I'm saying and before we move on. I tell you another story. I'm taking all my stories there. Years ago at the Cedar Valley Golf Course in Guthrie, Are you familiar with that area? Okay. So I did a house up there, and that was probably the first big one that I did with the turnout, because we had 67 people, and this was probably 10 or 12 years ago.
Oh, wow.
67 people turned out there. And we ended up selling. And afterwards, I learned that there was mostly the neighborhood came together. There were 4 neighbors that came together and said, we're buying this house because we want to control who's living here and what's going to happen. So it was it was a distressed property. So that was pretty cool. They didn't get the bid, but they were they were there, and they were a little upset because they lost out. They weren't willing to pay what another guy was. So
they wanted to pick their neighbor.
Yeah,
that always
pretty
sets
much.
off like alarm bells, right?
Yeah. Well, and that sale there taught me also another very important aspect about the auction, and that is title. Okay, so one of the processes that I put in place is I have the title, clear title, because when I sell this, it's subject to seller confirmation and a clear and marketable title. Well, I learned with that house that title has to be done before sale day, because that one ended up having over $1 million worth of liens against it.
Oh wow.
Yeah, so it didn't sell, obviously. So that was a good learning curve for me there.
So that's interesting. So you do all the title work ahead of time.
Absolutely.
While you're seasoning it.
Absolutely.
I love that phrase. You're seasoning it.
Everything's better when you season it.
Let it marinate a little bit. And so you're doing all that work's being done up front. Title work's done and everything. So when you get to that day, you've got buyers who have already had their opportunity to look at it. They've had an opportunity to inspect it. So at that point, there's really nothing besides buyer brings the money.
That's it. Yeah.
How quick after the auction day are you typically closing then?
When you have the title work there, you can close up to 10 days, because all it takes is about 10 business days for a title to change it over into a buyer's name. Okay. But I usually give 30 days. You know, within 30 days is what we put on there. Okay. Some buyers, they're working off a line of credit. They have to talk to their banker. You know, they're all, at the end of the day, they're all cash sales, though there may be some outside financing, but it's not contingent on.
Gotcha.
Yeah, makes sense.
Interesting. Man, I'm feeling very educated now.
I know. It's like this demystified the process a little bit, and I was just like, all right, this makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I can definitely see the value of the auction in many respects. Yeah, for sure. That there's probably a lot of transactions that could really benefit from that and simplify the process in a lot of ways. Yeah,
and it's relatively painless. The preparation that's very minimal. A couple of other things notable here that I would like to share are the types of auctions. Okay, because not only you have real estate auctions, but you have the kind that we use most are absolute auctions, and then you have reserve auctions. Okay, so an absolute auction means it's going to sell regardless of the price. Period. Okay. I steer away from those. I like to use more of a reserve, and that reserve is usually pretty discretionary. So that's why I always advertise it subject to seller confirmation.
So the seller at the end's got to say, "Yeah, I'm still willing to sell at whatever price it."
Exactly. Okay. So that's that piece of control that they have. So if they get what they want, they'll sell it. If they don't, then they can cancel the sale.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and there's a whole gamut of type of auctions, but those are the two most used in how we do business today.
Okay. So why would you ever use the absolute one if you could still say yes to a reserved? You could say, well, this way at least I get to see what it's selling for before I sell it. Right.
Well, your absolute, it definitely brings out more people. And you can get that same price as a reserve. You can hit that reserve because you have more people there, but the risk is there that you won't. Okay. With a reserve, now the psychology of this comes into play. Buyers are like, okay, there was a reserve. What is it? I don't know what it is. So you get them to thinking higher. Okay.
But then the absolute, it's a guaranteed sell that day. So you're going to get people out because there's no risk that the seller's going to have to sell it then at that point, basically.
Right. I never encourage that because that risk is there that, you won't get, maybe you only get $60,000 for a house that you really could, maybe get 100 for. Right. So I don't want sellers to leave any money on the table.
Right.
Now, could you minimize some of that risk by setting the minimum bid value? Is that, or do you Like, what kind of criteria do you use to set that minimum value?
Yeah, so I use that when I'm doing a reserve or this discretionary reserve. So we look at, you take a small house, we look at what the ARV is on it. What are houses like this selling for completely fixed up? Guesstimate about what it's going to take to put in there, and then based on experience, what do we think it will bring? And so from there, then I set the minimum. Okay. Now, if I were doing an absolute auction, I would say it's an absolute auction. Just show up and we'll start somewhere. Yeah. But with this reserve, we want to have a starting point, and also because I use the MLS platform, I have to have a price in there.
Okay.
So that kind of helps me enter it into the MLS without breaking any rules, and then we go up from there.
Okay.
Now, so if you're putting in the MLS, how does cooperation with other brokers work? That's actually kind of a question I had. If another realtor then says, hey, I've got a buyer who may be interested in this property, and so they want to bring the buyer, I assume, is there still cooperation there and a compensation offered?
Absolutely. And I'm glad you brought that up, because that was a high point I wanted to make sure that the listeners understand, is that I'm all about cooperation. And there's a multitude of ways that we can do that. We can do it, if you have a buyer, there's a 3% co-op, there's a 1% co-op, and it's all written out, it's all laid out how that plays out. If you have a listing, you have somebody with a unique property that they need to sell, I do referrals. I pay referral fees. I actually did one. Can I mention somebody's name?
I don't have a problem with it.
Okay. I did. Yeah, I did one for Scott Foster, actually.
Okay.
Out of Norman.
Yeah.
He had a client, had a house, couldn't sell it. We did an auction on it, and we walked away very happy.
That's fantastic.
Yeah. So, I'm all about cooperation.
Okay. That's good to know. I figured that, there's probably some way. I mean, being a realtor, we want to offer, we have to cooperate with other brokers and everything.
Absolutely.
So that's all worked out too. So
well, I realized.
Don't be scared to bring a buyer to an auction.
Absolutely. Bring them. As a matter of fact, the one in Yukon, I think we had 7 or 8 agents with clients there. And it actually sold with an agent, and she got paid. And there's several that I've co-opted with. Bring the buyer. I'm not naive enough to think that that's where the buyers are with agents. So I want to co-op with my colleagues.
Absolutely. Yeah, that makes sense.
Absolutely,
cool. Yeah. Well, Jesse, this has been jam-packed full of great information.
Yeah.
Want to give you an opportunity if you've got any parting words of wisdom, and also any contact information, so that if people have a question about an auction, maybe somebody's got a property they think would be good and want to work with you, how they can reach out to you.
Yeah, I appreciate that. If you have a house that's unique in itself, you're not sure how to find valuation on those, or those are the best properties to start with. I discourage listing a house traditional and then going auction, because once you create that digital footprint, you're kind of on an uphill battle. So if you have a property, you're not sure how to evaluate it, it's very unique. I have a very unique property that I'm looking at now. Give me a call. I would be glad to assess it and let you know if it'll work out well. And then there's always the co-op. I want to do that. But auctions are a great method. Like I said, for houses that have distressed properties are good. Short sales, we can do those at auction. Estates, probates, all those are ideal.
Okay.
And, if you want to reach out to me, you can go to my website at realty66.com. You can call me at my office at 348-HOME, 348-4663, and let's talk business.
Perfect.
Yeah.
That's fantastic. Jesse, thank you so much. This was just, I've learned a lot today. I haven't learned this much in such a short period of time in quite some time.
Well, I appreciate you guys having me on.
It was a lot of fun. Interesting.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to coming and spectating on one of these. It'll be interesting.
Yes.
Look forward to it.
Absolutely. Thanks, Jesse.
My pleasure.
Thanks.
So we can't wait for Nabil and I to go out and go watch an auction. It's going to be a good time, and maybe we'll record some audio and do it, do a podcast while there's an auction going on in the background.
I feel like that'd be an interesting process to watch.
Yeah,
we'll have to pick one of the really unique properties that he's talking about.
Yeah, for sure,
and get the full experience.
Absolutely, I look forward to it. So, man, I hope that was informative for everybody. It absolutely was for me. I'm sure there are a lot of realtors out there that just weren't familiar familiar with that process. And now you've got a new tool in your bag that if you've got a buyer and maybe you see that auction property, be willing to take those buyers out there and explain that process to them. Or if you've got a property that you need to sell, maybe having some trouble or it's a unique property, give Jesse a call. He can help you out with that auction and how to make that property sell a little bit easier.
For sure. And if you haven't done so yet, hit that subscribe button so you know when the next episode is released. And leave us a rating, write us a review. We love hearing from you, and we love your feedback.
We sure do. So send us an email, podcast@OKRealtors.com for any feedback you have. Or remember, if you've got questions for Grant Cody, the Real Estate Commission's Director for Capital Conference coming up, send those to us as well. And until next time, we'll see you next Tuesday on Talking Real.